Alright, so welcome back everybody. For this video, I'm going to show you guys how to play 6 Sojourns. Now, 6 Sojourns is an area control game, and it's also a set collection game. As we control the various areas, the various islands and sea locations that we can go to and get victory points for controlling those areas, we're also going to get victory points for these trades. We have cooking, we have carpentry, we have sewing, we have shoemaking, we have artistry, we have blacksmithing, and we have jewelry. These are the different trades, okay? And these trades are going to be on the cards that we purchase, okay? So, for instance, this card here has both shoemaking and carpentry on it. Now, you get victory points for having a certain amount of the different trades. For instance, if you have 5 cooking icons on cards, then that's going to give you 4 victory points. Same thing for carpentry, and same thing for sewing. If you have 5 of those icons, that's going to be worth 4 points at the end of the game. If you have 9 cooking icons, however, that's 7 victory points. If you have 8 carpentry icons, then that's still 7 victory points. If you have 7 sewing icons, then that's still 7 victory points. And as you see, the numbers will go down. There's less jewelry icons, and so therefore, you don't have to collect nearly as many to get the same amount of victory points as you do cooking, for instance, just to get the same amount of victory points, okay? And so you're going to get these on the cards that you purchase. That's the idea of what you're going to do. Now, like I said, you're going to get points for also controlling islands. You'll get victory points if you have the most control of an island. Okay, we'll get to how you will have the most control in a moment. You'll get victory points for each territory that you control, okay, as well. And you might also get victory points, like I said, for trades, and you also might get victory points if you control the entire ocean, or if you control most of the ocean. If you control it, as in you have most of the ocean territories under your control. With this particular map, if you control the most sea spaces, that's 4 extra victory points, okay? So there's multiple ways that you can get victory points, and if you're playing with the expansions, there's even more ways to score victory points. And I'm going to teach you guys how to play with each of the expansions, one at a time, one expansion at a time. But first, we're going to focus on how you play this game, with just the base game as is. So on your turn, every player is going to get to start at one location. It depends on the board you're playing on. I've got this board here, and so I've just set up the 2 players at 2 different locations on this island, because it seems to be one of the biggest, with the most grass areas that are connected to the ocean. The idea is, for setup, you'll get 1 house, so these are houses, and you'll get 2 people. So these almost cube-like things, which are almost completely cubes, they are your people, okay? They are your people that you'll be moving around. And so you'll get to start with 2 of them on the same location as a starting house. And you want the house and the 2 people in setup, you'll want them next to the ocean. That is the most ideal placement. You do not have to place them adjacent to an ocean, but it is recommended that you place that location near an ocean. And we'll get to why that is ideal in a moment. But that's the point for setup. That's what you'll start with, okay? And then every player is going to get to start with 12 coins, okay? 12 coins. The game is going to take place over a number of rounds. It's going to take about 9 rounds, okay? 9 rounds, okay? And each card that you purchase, you're allowed to purchase, you will always purchase 1 card every single round, every single turn that you have in each round. And so some are going to be worth 4, some might be worth 3, some might be worth 2 coins, some might just cost you a coin, and there are cards that are free to take as well. And if you do run out of coins before the end of the game, then that means you will be forced to purchase whatever the first card happens to be at the 0 location. But it does mean that if you do use up all your coins, then you can still get a card every turn regardless. Now, what do cards do? Well, let's look at one. This is one of the most basic of cards. So first you'll notice it has a bunch of different trade icons on them. So all cards will have trade icons on them. Some might have more than others, okay? And then sometimes they will have an ability here, or they will give you victory points based on something that you're going to want to do. And so that's another way you might score points. You're going to be focusing on getting points for the trades and points for controlling territories, just like in a normal area control game. But you also might want to do certain things based on the cards that you have that give you victory points. This one doesn't have that, though. And then whatever this happens to say is what you can do on your turn, okay? So you'll notice this has a picture of a house. It also has a picture of the person, the people in this game, and it has a 4 and it has this arrow. What this means is you can take a house of your color. So let's say I'm yellow. So I can take a house of my color. Now, I can't place a house on another spot with a house normally. So if I was to take this card, I don't have to actually place the house. I could just store the house and then play it on a future turn, which is nice because I only control one territory currently. What's also really cool is you are allowed to do this in any order you want. So you do not have to take the house first. You can do one of the other things first. Well, this icon means that you're going to get one more person. And when you get a new person, the new person that you get, if you get multiples, it doesn't matter, but new people always must be placed on a territory with a house. So I place it there because that's where my house is for yellow. And then this icon means is I can have a total of 4 movement. So movement is very nice because you see these 3 people here? If I was to take all 3 of them, because I can, if I was to take all 3 of them and put them here, that would count as 1 movement. Even though I moved 3 people to one space, it still counts as 1 full movement if I take the whole group, the whole crowd of people, and move them from one territory to another. That still counts as 1 movement. Of course, I don't have to take the whole group. I can decide, you know what, I'm going to take these 2 and I'm going to put them there. And then I could take this one and put it there, and that would be 2 separate movement. Now, maybe I don't want to move anymore, or maybe I can't. Well, the cool thing is you do not have to use all of the movement. So you're not required to use all of this. So that's nice. But you'll definitely want to place as many people as you can and place as many houses as you can for sure. But you want to obviously use as much of this as possible, but you're not required to. So that's the beauty of that. But yes, let's say I started here, and let's say I decided, you know what, I want to use this house that I'm going to get immediately, but I can't place it on the territory I have a house. So I could be like, well, I'm going to move this guy here, and then I'm going to take this house, and instead of storing it, I'm going to place it here. And then you know what? I'm going to place this guy here. I'm going to place this guy over here at this castle. So that was utilizing my card to the best of my ability. I got this guy earlier, of course, and moved him, and then placed the house. So it's nice. You can do it in any order, which is awesome. Amazing that you can do this in any order. So let me explain how control works. Control is this person counts as 1 control. This house counts as 2 control. So let's use some explanations. Let's say we have a house here, and we put this red one here. Who controls this territory? If you're saying it's red, you'd be wrong, because it's yellow that controls it, because yellow has 2 control of this area, not 1. Also, if I was to place another red one here, this territory now is not controlled by anyone because it's a tie. Nobody gets this territory. So if there is a tie, then no one controls the territory. Ties do not count. So no one can beat ties unless you're playing with a particular expansion or something like that. So then if red wanted to take this from yellow, they would have to place another guy there. Now, when a house is placed on a territory, there is a card that breaks this rule, but normally if you're not playing with that card, then it won't be a problem. But when a house is placed, you are not allowed to place one of your houses on a territory with an opponent's house. So that's the advantage. of placing out houses. Not only do they give you 2 control, but they pretty much prevent other players from also putting houses at that location and trying to control them. That's kind of the idea. So that's how that is going to work, okay? So for placement. But yeah, and the cool thing about this card is it was at the 0 location, so I would have not had to spend a single coin doing so. Okay, after you take this card, then every card gets slid down to 0. So that means the cards that were more expensive that you couldn't purchase, they'll get cheaper, making it cheaper for other players going next. And then a new card is drawn and is going to be placed at the 4 location. Normally, these are placed completely straight, but I did it at an angle so you can kind of see the writing and kind of see the icons a little bit better for the explanation. So that's the idea. So that's 1 full turn. And that's pretty simple of a turn to do, of course. But, you know, there are some cards that that have abilities and stuff. So let's take a look here. So we've got a card here that gives you 1 coin at the start of your turn. So that's something you might get. There's more than one of these. See, there's another one of those, for instance. This one would give you 3 points if you control 2 islands. So let's say I controlled this island. I had the most pieces on here, most places on here, pieces on there. I could get the 3 points at the end of the game for controlling it. So let's use an example. Let's say I just have 1 guy there on that territory, right? And let's say I have, you know, just 1 guy on that territory. Since there are no enemy pieces on this island, and no enemy pieces on this island, and I control at least 1 territory on this island, and at least 1 territory in this island, and it was game over, I would meet the requirements of controlling these 2 islands, getting me the 3 extra points. Also, I'd also get 1 victory point for each island I control, regardless. So I'd get 1 point for this one, and 1 point for this one, plus 1 point for the territory that I'm controlling, plus another point for the territory I'm controlling. So if this was just these 2 islands were my equation, and I had this 1 card only, I'd get 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'd get about 7 points. So that's how that's going to work. So obviously you don't want to, you know, let your opponents have an island for free if all they got to do is put 1 little guy on an island to control it. You obviously do not want them to gain that island so easily, and you're also going to go to that island and try to control it too, and that's the idea. Now, how do you get to these islands, though? Because, well, in this game, people can't swim. So how do you get to the islands? Well, let us find a card. Here we go. Here's a card. So this card, you'll notice, has a boat icon on it. And so, if you get a boat icon, you can build a boat, okay? So let's say this was the card I purchased. I could place a boat next to a house. It has to go in the water, and it has to go next to a territory with a house. Your house color, obviously. And you can do that, and that's allowed. I couldn't build the boat over here, though, because it's not next to my house. It's not next to anybody's house anyways. So it wouldn't matter regardless. But yes, I couldn't build it there, but I could build it right here. Now, when you decide to do movement, okay, when you get a movement card, you don't have to move people. You can also move boats around. So if you use one of your arrow movements, you can move one of them 1 space. But if you had multiple boats and you wanted to move them, they would still cost you 1 separate movement. So if I was to move both of these here, that would cost me 2 movement, not 1. So it's not the same with boats. You can move multiples of people, but you can't move multiples of boats for the same amount of movement. Now, what's really cool is if, let's say I had this boat here, and I wanted to move everybody to an adjacent island. Well, what's an adjacent island with this water territory? An adjacent island to this water territory could be this island, and it can also be this island here, or this island territory as well. So if I wanted to, I could move all of these guys here, these 2, with this boat being here, and move them here. Not only would that only cost me 1 movement, but that only cost me 1 movement regardless. Because it's adjacent to this island with just this one lone water territory in the middle. So think of these boats as bridges. They are allowed to basically traverse. They can never, however, go in water. This is never allowed, okay? So the only way you can control water territories is if you're going to be placing boats into the territories and you're fighting over, well, fighting with other boats of other colors, okay? That's the idea. So you can use them as bridges to get around and then move them again later and get them around to other islands, or just build more boats to kind of start building a sort of boat bridge all over the place to get to where you need to go, okay? So that would just cost one movement, and I could still, like I said, move as many as I want from one territory to another as long as it was connected to something like that, okay? That's the general idea of how you're going to get your people to the other islands, and with these boats, no less. And let's say you have a bunch of boats already, and you don't want to build one right away. Boats are another thing you can store. You can store your boats, and you can store houses. You cannot store people. You can only store boats and houses, and that's it. But don't worry. This area control game is peaceful. There's no stealing of people. There's no killing of people. So when you place out people, there's nothing bad will ever happen to them at all. So you don't have to worry about losing your people. So that's another great thing. And the same thing with houses and boats. There's no houses in this game that are going to get destroyed, and there's no boats in this game that are going to get destroyed. Okay? So you don't have to worry about that either. But then, so let's go back to some of the other abilities. This one says you may move one additional each turn. So let's say you played a card and it doesn't give you movement. If you have this card, it means you can move one time. You get one movement each turn, whether you have an icon that says you get movement or not. So if you had a card that gave you 3 movement, then you would have 4 movement every turn if you had this card. If you had a card that gave you 0 movement, you would still have 1 movement every turn. So that's what that card means. This one says each time you build a boat, you can gain 1 person. So you get a free person every time you build a boat. This one says you may build houses on spaces that contain houses. So this is really cool. This card breaks the normal rule. So the thing is, normally you can never place a house on an enemy territory with another house. But if you have this card here, this is allowed. You can build your house on a territory with an enemy house, and that is allowed if you have this card. Only if you have this card. You can also do that with your own, too. You can build multiple of your houses on the same territory as well, and that's allowed if you have this card. So that's what that means. So that's something you could end up, finding in the course of the game. This one says if you have 5 or more houses, you get 3 victory points. Gives you tons of people. This one means if you have no sword icons, or should I say no blacksmithing icons at all, then this card is going to give you 2 victory points. That's really hard to pull off, so it's not a lot of victory points anyways. Let's see. If you control a space with another player's house, you get 3 victory points. So like I said, you're going to want, if you have this card and an opponent has a house, then you're going to want to place out some of your people so that way you control a territory that has an opponent's house. And if that was your equation for that area at the end of the game, you would satisfy this card and you would get 3 victory points. But you only get to score these cards 1 time. So it wouldn't matter if an opponent had a house here, for instance, and you had 3 of your people over here, as an example, okay? 3, I wouldn't get 6 points for meeting this requirement twice. I only get it 1 time. I'm only going to get the points 1 time. So that's how that's going to work. Okay, so let's see. And like I said, there's not all cards are going to have abilities. This one says if you have 4 plus money, you get 3 money at the 3 victory points at the end of the game. So if you don't end up using all of your coins, because you might not, then you get an extra 3 victory points at the end of the game. That's pretty cool. This one says if you have 4 more people on spaces you don't control, you get 4 victory points. That's hard to do, but not impossible if you're playing with certain expansions, especially the Volcano expansion as an example. Each time you build a house, gain 1 person. So you can, if you got that card, every time you build a house, you'd get another person. You may place new people where you have people. So this card breaks the placement rule for placing out people. If I have this card, let's say I have a person here, I could place out a person here as well if I already had a person here to begin with. That's what this card does. It lets you break the placement rule, because normally when you place out new people, they always have to go onto a spot with a house. But like I said, if there was, multiples, if there was people at another territory, this card would let you place them there instead if you wanted to, because there's no house there. So that's the general idea of how that's going to work. For example. So there's a lot of different cards. There's a lot of different abilities that you could potentially get, and things that give you victory points and stuff like that. So that's kind of, it gives you an idea at least of how these are going to work. So like I said, on your turn, you will purchase a card, okay? Spend the coins if it costs coins, then slide them down accordingly, okay? And draw a new card out, which, I have to keep moving the table for, because this is a table hog of a game, and so on. You take your turns, and like I said, there's 9 rounds, okay? And then you'll get victory points based on this, on how many of these icons you have, and for every territory you control that's yours, you're going to get points for controlling an entire island. If you have the majority of control, as in the most of the territories you control are yours and not your opponent's, then you get an extra point for that. And that includes these smaller islands, including this tiny little island, for instance. You can notice that there's white lines that indicates that this is 2 different territories. For instance, this one doesn't have any, so it's 1 territory, 1 island. So that's an easy control, as an example. But yeah, that's how you play the base game. So let me explain how the Places expansion works next. So in 6 Sojourns, there's 8 different maps, okay? And this is one of 8 different maps. And for each map, there is a bunch of different places that you'll notice on the board that are just cool to look at, This particular one has just tons of different towns and settlements, right? And so when you're playing with the Places expansion, then you're going to add these cards to the game that go with the locations. You'll notice, for instance, this is, if you control the clock building, you get 3 victory points. Where's the clock building at? Well, it is right up here. It's this territory here. Okay, let's pick a closer one. Ooh, Crimson Castle. If you control the Crimson Castle, you get 3 victory points. Well, that one you can definitely see is the Crimson Castle, as an example, right? So some of these cards, they're going to get mixed with the base cards, okay? And so some of these cards might show up, but you don't know which ones will show up. And so while you're trying to control, certain areas for points, you're going to want to control certain locations for potential points as well, which is why I didn't have anybody start at those locations for the Places, because controlling these actually matters, because you might get extra victory points if you can get these cards, okay? If you control the Castle Town, 3 victory points, for example. And they act as normal cards. They still give you the same benefits. Movement, ships, people, more people, movement, houses. So they give you all of the normal stuff that the base cards still give you, but they give you victory points based on their places, or based on the places that you control at the end of game. So now this is now going to increase the opportunity of conflict, because now your opponents, well, they see the card that you just got, they know you control the territory that you just got, and so now they're going to want to take it from you by placing out more of their troops, so you do not get the extra victory points. And that's kind of the idea. Most of these expansions, they increase the conflict. So there's no violence in this game. There's no attacking, but there is conflict of controlling the various territories. You could easily branch out and just control your own individual territories, but what would be the fun in that? The fun is trying to take control of the areas your opponents control. That's the general idea. In a two-player game, you could easily branch out and this player could take that side of the map, that player could take that side of the map. But in a four-player game, you're definitely going to be fighting more over the different areas. But with these expansions, they increase that conflict of controlling areas that your opponents are also trying to control. So that's all this expansion does, is it just adds some more cards, some places for the board that you're playing on. And there's, like I said, there's cards for each of the different maps in the game. So that's how the Places expansion works. Okay, so next I'm going to explain the Trade Tokens expansion. So the Trade Tokens expansion just adds these extra trade tokens to the game. What you're going to do for setup is you're going to place one on each of the different islands and one in one of the sea locations. You're not really supposed to be placing multiples of these on the same islands, but I guess it is dependent on map. Each map is a little different as far as there's one map that is almost all land and it just has lakes, for example. But for the most part, you just want one on each of the different islands and one in one ocean spot. So what these do is they just add the extra trade icons to the equation. Now, these will sit at a territory. Okay, so let me place one there. And let's place one here, for instance. Let's place one in the water, as an example. Now, the players that control these locations at the end of the game are the ones that get to claim it. Okay, well, those are for boats, right? So they would be the ones that gets it. So now this adds more conflict because now you're going to want these extra trade icons so that way you can increase your chances of getting the maximum amount of victory points for your trade icon set collection going on over here. So you're going to want to have the majority at these locations. So not only are you going to be fighting over the individual locations and places, but if you're playing with the Places expansion and you're playing with the trades tokens expansion, then you're trying to control both of those locations as well to control these, so that way you get these at the end of the game. That's kind of the idea. So the player who has the control would get the icon. Now, if there is a tie, then nobody controls it, then therefore nobody gets it at the end of the game, as an example. But yeah, if this was the equation at the end of the game, yellow would get to take this, yellow would get to take this, nobody would take this, because that's a tie. Okay? So they just add, like I said, a little extra to the game, and maybe an increased chance that you might be able to complete and get the maximum victory points for these icons. That's basically all this expansion does. So that's the Trade Tokens expansion. Alright, so next is the Sea Serpents expansion. So if you're playing with the Sea Serpents expansion, you're going to add all of the Sea Serpent cards, okay? Now you'll notice, except for the top part, everything is pretty much the same on the bottom, except they seem more powerful probably, right? And they are. They definitely seem a little bit more powerful in terms of what you get when you take one of these Sea Serpent cards. But yes, they play like normal, okay? With the exception of, like I said, there is one here that is a little different, but the rest are all the same. So when you take a Sea Serpent card, you can place a Sea Serpent. So the idea is you're going to want to place this Sea Serpent on a territory that has an opponent's boat, like right there, as an example. Now, what do Sea Serpents do when you're placing them on a territory with an opponent's boat? Well, what they do is they are going to take a coin from your opponent. So this is the only form of stealing in the game, okay? So let's say your opponent has some coins, and you're running out of coins, and you take a Sea Serpent card, and you place a Sea Serpent on your opponent's boat. You're going to take one of their coins, okay? That's what that means. You get to take one of their coins. If there's multiple colored boats, so let's say you're playing with multiple players, and let's say there's 2 different colored boats on this one territory, and you place a Sea Serpent to there, then that means you're going to take a coin from each opposing player. which is awesome. Now, you can also place a sea serpent on a spot that has your boat, and nothing happens. So if you place it here, and I had my boat here too, then it wouldn't matter because it doesn't hurt me, because it's technically my sea serpent that I'm placing out. But really, that's all it really does. Now, there is one other thing that these sea serpents will do. The player who controls a territory with sea serpents, okay, let me find another boat. At the end of the game, for every sea serpent that is being controlled by the amount of players, you're going to get an extra victory point. So, for instance, this sea serpent here would give me 1 extra victory point if I controlled this sea location, which I do currently. So instead of getting 1 point for controlling this territory that's in the ocean, I would get 2 because there's a sea serpent here as well. That is also interesting because when you place out another sea serpent in the future, you're allowed to place it in the same territory as another sea serpent, and that's allowed. It's one big territory anyway. And then if you have multiple sea serpents, then you're going to get, and you control this territory, that means you're going to get a victory point for this sea serpent and a victory point for that sea serpent. So that's kind of the idea of placing out sea serpents in other areas. Now, what's really cool is there is one card in here that says you can remove a sea serpent from the board and then place it again. So that's another thing you could do. You could remove one with this card and then place it somewhere else. That suits you better, perhaps, right? Maybe you don't think you're going to control this area, but, you know, you've got a lot of boats on the other side of the map, and you get the one card that lets you pick up a sea serpent and move it, and you have lots of boats over here. Let me find another boat. Okay, then you could pick this one up with this card and place it over here. It doesn't hurt you because it doesn't hurt you, but you could get it for the extra victory points at the end of the game. That's kind of the idea, the strategy behind this one card. But like I said, there's only one, so the chances of you getting it is still slim because, after all, these cards are going to be mixed in with the base cards. And if you're playing with other expansions that add cards, it increases the likelihood this card will never see the light of day in your game. But that's the idea of the Sea Serpents expansion. Just gives you some additional ways to score points, and also makes it so the sea locations are more tempting to try to control, because now you're going to get extra victory points for controlling certain sea territories if there are sea serpents around. But that's the general idea of how the Sea Serpents expansion works. Alright, so next is the Specialties expansion. So if you're adding the Specialties expansion to the game, all you're going to do is add these Specialties cards to the base cards, okay? Now what these do is they're just like regular base cards. They still do the same stuff down here. They still have icons up there, but they give you victory points based on certain icons that you're collecting. Instead of just collecting one, you're normally going to try to collect 2 of certain kinds for the additional scoring. So like, for instance, this one will give you 4 points if you have 6 of these. That does not mean you have to have 6 of each of these. You just need 6 of these 2 icons. So you could have like 2 of the carpentry, for instance, and you could have 4 of the blacksmithing icons. And if that was your equation, you would complete this because you would have 6 getting the 4 extra victory points. So that's what these cards, these specialty cards do, is they just give you additional ways of scoring victory points if you think you're collecting certain types together. This one, you don't have to have 2. This one, you just have to have 3 jewelry. That's a pretty easy one to do. This one, you just have to have 4 blacksmithing. You know, so some of these, you just have to have a certain amount, and you get extra victory points as well. So that's nice. So it just adds some more ways to get victory points is all they basically do. Now, there is one card in here, this expansion. So if you're playing with this expansion, okay, make sure to take this card out unless you're playing with the trade tokens, okay? If you're playing with this expansion, then you can include this card, but otherwise, there's no point in having this card because this card only works if you're playing with this expansion here. Now, what this means is you have to control 4 trade tokens at the end of the game, meaning you will have to have claimed 4 of these, okay? That means you're going to be wanting to claim 4 different areas on the map. That's not easily done, for one thing. It's not even, and you'll notice it's not that great of a card either. So it's not easy to pull off, but it's also not that great of a card in general. So regardless of the case, this card isn't that useful unless you're playing with this expansion anyways. So make note of that. This card is basically for this expansion, but it's not added to this expansion unless you're playing the Specialties expansion. And you'll notice it has the word Specialties on it, just like the other cards do. Okay? So that's how the Specialties expansion is going to work. Okay, so now we have another expansion. This is the Feuds expansion. There's only one card that works with this expansion, and it's probably one of the easiest expansions to implement in the game. What this is going to do is, well, let's read it. It says, all players get +1 victory point per space you control that has at least one opponent's piece. This means that at the end of the game, this territory, this card does not give you an extra point for this territory. What that means is your opponent would actually have to have a piece there, and you would have to control it in order for you to get the extra victory point. This increases the conflicts because, hey, you're going to want victory points now. You're going to want to get extra victory points, which means you're going to want to try to control areas that your opponents control for the extra victory points that this card will provide. And what's cool is it's double-sided. So on the other side, it says Fierce Feuds. It says all players get 2+ victory points per space you control that has at least one opponent's piece. That one opponent's piece can be a boat, it can be a person, it can be a house. So just so you know, it can be any one of those, as long as they have one piece. But yes, that's all this expansion does, is just give you an additional way to score points and add a little bit more conflict to the game. So that's another expansion done. Next we have the Values expansion. All this does is add these 4 cards to the game. You're going to shuffle these and hand one out to each player based on player count. And basically, they just give each player a starting special ability. They get to start with this card, and they get a special ability. So let's read what it says. This one is Value Building. It says you may build houses in spaces that already contain houses. So what's really powerful about this is another card that breaks the normal house rule, where you can only build one house per territory. But if Red had this card, Red could build their house in this territory with their opponent's house, and that's fine. And he could do it again, because you can build as many houses as you want in the same territory, and that's allowed. Powerful little ability for sure, but that's something you could do with this card. Then it's going to give you a scoring condition as well. It says it's going to give you 1 victory point per space you control that has at least one house. So that means while you might want to place your houses in a territory with opponent's house, you will most likely will not be placing multiple of your houses in the same territory. So that way you can control as many territories as you can with the houses that you have, or the houses that you're able to build, right? So that's the general idea for that card. Okay, then we have the sea. Your opponent, so if you have the sea, you control sea spaces which are tied for most ships, and you get 1 extra victory point per sea space you control. So what's useful about this is you break ties, basically. If you are a red player and you have a tie at various locations, it doesn't matter. You automatically control it, all right? So that's what this card does. So if I was red player and I had this card, I'd get a point for this and a point for this. I'd actually get 2 and 2, because I still get a point for controlling it for each one of these, but I'm getting an additional point for controlling it. So I'm getting 2, 4, for instance, points. So that's what that means. This is the only card that breaks that rule for ties, and only in the ocean, okay? Still, that's pretty powerful. Of course, that means your opponent can still control a sea area as long as they have more than you do, okay? So that's what that does. All right, next card. This one is Cunning. You get to start the game with 4 extra coins. So instead of having 12 coins, you get 16 coins for the start of the game. And then each victory ability is worth 1 extra point for you. So each card that is going to score you victory points, like this card here, if I completed this card and got the 3 points, this card here gives me an extra point for completing this one at the end of the game. For instance, same thing with this one, same thing with this one as well. And if you're playing with expansions like the Places expansion and stuff like that, it would help towards that as well. So that's pretty powerful. And then value trades. So first of all, this one is going to do is it gives you a wild trade at the end of the game, a wild trade. So you can use this card as any one of these icons, but only one. So choose wisely. Look at all of them and see which ones this would most be beneficial for you in order to scoring the maximum amount of points that you can. It also has another ability. Each trade that you reach 7 victory points is worth 2 more for you. So for each one of these that you make 7 points on, so if I had 9 of these icons, 9 of these cooking icons, instead of getting 7 points, I'd get 9 victory points because I have this card. That's what that means. And for every one that I manage to make it to the highest number value here. So if I had 4 rings at the end of the game, that would give me 9 victory points as well. So that's powerful. So that's what these value cards do. They just give you a starting ability, which is pretty cool. That's all they do. So let's go on to the next expansion. All right, so next we have the Upgrades expansion. When you play with the Upgrades expansion, you're going to need these cards, okay? And you're also going to play with these tokens here as well. These will get shuffled in with the base cards, and you'll notice they have the same stuff for stuff that you can do, but they also all have the same thing. They all say the same thing, and that is upgrade a trade, okay? So when you take one of these cards that says upgrade a trade, you may take any of these face-up trade tokens that haven't been used yet. All right, so let's say I want to take this +2, right? Then what you're gonna do is you're gonna place it to next to one of these. So let's say I want to add it right here, for example. I could do that. That's what these extra spots are for instance. Okay, and so then what this is going to do is it's actually going to add to the victory points of this particular icon, cooking, because I put it there. So that means at the end of the game, if I have 5 of these icons, instead of getting 4 points, because of this upgrade token is next to it, I'm actually going to get 6 victory points. If I had 9 icons of this cooking icon, instead of getting 7, I'd get 9 victory points. So basically, it upgrades the amount of victory points you're going to get for these icons. So when you take one of these, it's obviously going to be one that you're going to want to be collecting. Something that you've already got some icons for that you think you might be able to finish and complete, so you get the extra victory points. But regardless of the case, you share this victory point equation. So if you're going the cooking route and another player's going the cooking route, and you get the maximum amount of points because you have the amount of icons you need, and they also have the amount of icons that they need, they're going to get the same amount of victory points as you, even if you're the one that placed the token. Does not matter. So that means you might want to do that, but you also might want to mess with your opponents as well. There's some -1s. So this is a -1. So if you put it on a trade icon location, you can make it so that this is only 3 points and this is only going to be 6 points, as an example. There's a couple of those -1s. There's also a -2 as well. So you can do this to your opponents. If you think your opponents are going to go for one of these and they've collected a bunch, you can mess them up so they get less victory points as well. And you can put a maximum of two upgrade tokens, okay, on each icon. So never more than 2, and whatever equation you put down is going to mess with this. So this is -3, but if someone was to put -1 and then someone put down +1, then they would just cancel each other out and the victory points would remain the same. So that's nice, at least. But perhaps maybe somebody put a -1 here and then somebody put a +2 here, then it's still +1, which is nice, especially if you're going that route. So that's That's basically all the trades expansion does. So we've explained most of the expansions. There's still the exploration expansion, the shrines expansion, the mountains expansion, the volcano expansion, and the so there's exploration expansion, shrine expansion, airship expansion, mountain expansion, volcanoes expansion. There's so many more expansions still to talk about. So let's move on to the next one. All right, so now I have 2 expansions set up. I have these little tokens here. This is for the exploration expansion. I also have these mountains here. This is for the mountains expansion. So first, let me explain how the exploration expansion is going to work. First of all, you'll place out these tokens here at basically like you would the trade tokens. One on each island, one in the ocean. Is basically how you want to place them out. Now, when you're moving around, okay, so let's say I decide I want to move this guy here, and that would cost me 1 movement. You'll notice there's this token here. We don't know what it is, this exploration token is, right? But if I use another movement, I can uncover what it is and keep it. So what is it? I used, so let's say I used 2 movement. So 1 movement here, and then 2 movement to uncover this. Then I get whatever it is. Ooh, this means I get an additional person that I must immediately place. That's what this one does, for instance. And so there's different icons on these. So you're going to spend an additional movement to uncover them, but you get them immediately. So these will not stick around for long, and that means you're going to want to spread out so you can get as many of these as you possibly can. And there can all be all sorts of different things on them. This one, you immediately get an extra coin, for example. This one, you immediately get an extra house, but you can still store it. This one gives you an extra boat, but once again, you can store it, okay? Let's see. And then you might get some, this one gives you an extra victory point at the end of the game, so that's nice. And then there's like some that are just going to give you extra trade tokens. So this one would give me an extra one of these shoemaking icons at the end of the game. So that's cool. And so there's, like I said, several of them, but you may not necessarily have every single one of these in the game, okay? But there's several of them. So that's the idea of the exploration expansion, is it adds a little extra something to the game, and it is sort of like an exploration because you're not sure what you're going to uncover. But that's how that expansion is going to work. Now, the way the mountain expansion is going to work is mountains are sort of like a almost like a block or an impenetrable wall almost. So basically they make it harder for you to move into certain territories that have these mountains, okay? And they're kind of randomly placed out as well, and I didn't place them all out. I just placed a few. So normally when you move from one territory to another, it only costs 1 movement to move as many people from one territory to another, and that's fine. But when you're playing with the mountains expansion and you want to move into a territory that has a mountain, you can't do that way. So let's say I had 3 movement and I moved all 3 of these guys into this territory with the mountain. I could do that, but it would use up all of my movement, and I wouldn't have any more movement. So it does make it harder to move guys or people into territories that have mountains on them. But what's really cool is, let's say I had these 3 people in this mountain territory and I wanted to move them all. I could move all of them from there to there, and that would still only cost me 1 movement. So while moving into a mountain is going to make it harder on you, moving out of a mountain is just the same as any normal movement into a territory from another territory to another. So that's how those 2 expansions work. Exploration and mountains expansion. They're both 2 separate expansions. All right, so for the next expansion, we have the Shrines expansion. Now, when you're playing with the Shrines expansion, each player is going to get 3 of these shrines, and they're going to add it to their normal supply of people and houses and stuff like that. On your turn, when you're taking your turn and placing your people out and moving and building houses and ships, you are allowed to place one of these 3 shrines that you start with onto a territory that you have at least one person or house on. Okay? Now, the idea is that this is basically sort of like the land version of the Sea Serpent expansion. Because with the Sea Serpent expansion, what you normally do for victory points is you get 1 extra victory point for each location that you control that's in the water that has a Sea Serpent. You get an extra victory point. And just like in the Sea Serpent expansion, you can have multiple Sea Serpents on the same territory. Same thing with shrines. You can put multiple shrines on the same territory, and that's fine. But the player who controls it at the end of the game is going to get 1 extra victory point for the shrine that's in their territory they control. So if there's 2 shrines in that territory, they get 2 points because they get 1 for each of the shrines. So that's the general idea. So while these shrines you can place out in a territory that you currently control, an opponent can come along and take it from you, as in they can take control of it, and then therefore they would get the points for this shrine. So use these carefully, because placing these out does mean that it's going to increase the chances that a player is going to come and try to take control of a territory you already control. That's the general idea. But you can do that to your opponents that they place shrines on as well, further adding to the conflict and enjoyment of the game. So that's how the Shrines expansion is going to work. All right, so next we have the Airship expansion. When you play this expansion, you're going to place these airships randomly on 2 different land territories. For the rest of the game, these tokens will stay on this territory. Now, what they do is first of all, you have to have some people already on a space with a, airship on it. So during the course of your turn, if you move people onto a territory that has a airship on it, nothing is going to happen. But then at the start of your turn, or, assuming you've already got people on a territory when you're starting your turn, what you can do is you can move the people from this territory to any land territory on the board. In a sense, this airship is going to take you anywhere you want to go as long as it's land, okay? So I could go from here to here. It would cost me just 1 movement, and I could do that. I could take all 3 of these people for 1 movement all over to there. This will still stay here, but it does cost money. It's going to cost you a coin every time you do this, but there has to be already people there to begin with when you're taking your move action and all that. So that's how this expansion is going to work. It just makes it a little easier to get around, especially if you're having a hard time getting cards that have boats on them and stuff like that. It increases that possibility of really spreading around. And that's how the Airship expansion works. All right, so for the next expansion I'm going to teach you, and the last expansion I'm going to teach you for this video, is the Volcano expansion. There's one more expansion, but I'm not going to teach you it, and I'll explain why after this. So when you're playing with the Volcano expansion, there are 2 maps you can play that have volcanoes on them, but you're not required to play with them in order to play with the Volcano expansion. In fact, you have this token here, and you can turn a territory into a volcano during setup, okay? So let's say this territory is the volcano. Now, when you're playing with the Volcano expansion, what you're going to do is, for setup, there's going to be these lava tokens, and there's going to be 1 placed on the card that costs 0, and there's going to be 1 placed on the card that costs 1. Whenever you take a card that costs 1 or 0, you're going to get a lava token, which you must place out, okay? And then when you move cards down, okay, down the line, that means that there will be another lava token added to the card, to one of those 2 cards again. So basically, if you're saving money and you're going the cheap route and you're buying the cheap cards, you're also going to get these lava tokens, which could help you out by making it harder on your opponents, or it could make it harder for you if you're trying to control territories that are next to a volcano. So what you do is, the first one you must place on the territory that has a volcano. So I could, for instance, place it there because it already has a volcano. For future reference, whenever I place out a lava token, though, I can place it on the territory that has a volcano, Or I can place it on a territory adjacent to the volcano as long as there is one lava already on a territory that has a volcano. I mean, has a lava token already on it. And then that's how these lava tokens are going to spread over the course of the game, is they can literally spread to the entire island that they are on. You can also put, like I said, multiple lava tokens onto a territory, and that is also fine. Basically, what these do is they make it much harder to control the territories because they're almost like an additional opponent you're playing against. So since this territory here has 2 lava tokens, you would have to have at least 3 of your people on it, or house. You'd have to have at least 3 control on it to basically control this territory. So that means that this territory here with 1 person on it and 1 lava token means that nobody controls it, okay? And it wouldn't matter if it was a tie or if there was more lava than people, no one still controls that territory, as an example. But the red player still controls this territory because he has 2 people and there's only 1 lava token on here. But this player also still controls this territory because there's 3 people and 2 lava tokens. So lava is going to spread. It's going to make it harder to control territories that the lava token is on, or should I say the volcano token is on, and it's going to make it harder to control territories. So it's going to add more conflict to the game and almost make it feel like you're playing against an additional player because of these lava tokens. And that's kind of the idea I think they were going for with this particular expansion. Now, there is one more expansion left I have not explained. It's called the Economy expansion, but it requires you to play with 2 map boards, and my table is not big enough for 2 map boards. So I decided I'm just not going to explain it because it's just too hard to explain because, like I said, I don't have enough space for it. And I figure I explained every other expansion in the game, and you should be able to play this game with several expansions, except for obviously economy, thanks to this video, hopefully. So I hope you guys can figure it out, the economy expansion, on your own. But it does change the game up quite a bit, the economy expansion. It's the most complex expansion for sure. But yes, I think for the most part, you should be able to enjoy 6 sojourns and play with most of the expansions thanks to this video, hopefully. So I hope you guys liked this video. Don't forget to leave me a like on my video if you guys liked this video. And, maybe consider subscribing to my channel if you guys like watching my videos. And I'll see you guys again next time. Bye.